This video is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc. with free weekly content and free shipping on orders over $150. You can save 5% site-wide by using the promo code MTGMudsta. If you're looking for a direct way to help the channel, please consider joining my Patreon and becoming a member of the generic Goblin Gang. Hey gang, and welcome back. Today's game features two worlds colliding, with Kuzno joining one of my other playgroups to have some fun. In today's game, Kuzno is playing Cadira, keeping Forest, Windswept Heath, Rampant Growth, Shalai, March of Multitudes, and Tireless Tracker. Seb and Max have joined us, with Seb playing Hapatra, keeping Yavimaya, 2 Swamps, Forest, 3 Visits, Zulaport Cutthroat, and Finn. Max is playing one of his favorite decks with Gavi, keeping Sacred Foundry, Adakar Wastes, Improbable Alliance, Mountain, Idyllic Tutor, Talisman of Conviction, and Lonely Sandbar. Last but not least, this is an old game, so I'm still playing my old Otrimi deck, keeping Thrun, Swamp, Forest, Talisman of Dominance, Auspicious Starrix, Souvenir Snatcher, and an Arcane Signet. I win the die roll and start us off. I display a Forest and pass. Kuzno plays the Windswept Heath and sacrifices it, losing 1 to find a land. Seb's got a Swamp and passes. Max is in no rush, playing a Sacred Foundry which he has come in tapped. I play a Swamp and tap 2 for Arcane Signet. Kuzno plays a Forest for turn and pays 2 for a Rampant Growth, going into his library to find another tap basic. Seb's got a Forest, and they bring out Hapatra and pass. Max plays an Adakar Wastes, tapping 2 for Talisman of Conviction. My turn is quite quick, as I play a Forest and cast Cold-Eyed Selkie. Kuzno draws but misses his land drop. He still has enough mana at least to cast Cadira though, and passes. Seb plays a Swamp for turn and swings Hapatra at Max. She deals 2, and on damage, Seb has the -1/-1 counter going to the Selkie, making a snake token and killing my creature. Seb then casts 3 visits and goes to find a Shockland. They take 2 so it'll come in untapped, and shortcuts, playing out a Zulaport Cutthroat, and passes while searching for Overgrown Tomb. Max plays a tapped Desert of the Mindful for turn. He then casts a Vizier of Tumbling Sands, and passes. I draw and miss my land drop as well, but am still able to cast a Talisman of Dominance. I then tap my remaining mana for Lifecrafter's Bestiary, and I pass to Kuzno. Kuzno plays out a Tireless Tracker in his main phase, and plays a Flooded Strand. This gets him a clue token from the landfall trigger, and he then cracks the strand to find a Savannah and makes another clue token. Going to combat, Cadira then hits me for 3, and Kuzno gets to make 2 bunny tokens from Cadira's trigger. With nothing else, he passes. Seb plays Yavimaya as their land for turn, and now everyone has forests. They then cast a Grave Pact and move to combat. Hapatra goes at me, and I take the hit, and Seb puts a -1/-1 counter onto one of Kuzno's bunnies. They also get to make a snake token. With nothing else, Seb passes. Max plays a Mountain for turn, and then taps 5 mana for Gavi. He gets to free cycle one of his cycling lands, drawing a card and making a cat token before passing to me. I get a Scry trigger from my Bestiary, and I keep it there. I then play out Thrun, Breaker of Silence, and pass after that. Kuzno has an Arch of Araska coming in, and he gets to make a clue token from the Tireless Tracker. He then taps enough to cast Shalai, and passes to Seb. Seb plays a Swamp for turn, and casts Cultist of the Absolute. And then plays Finn the Fangbearer. Going to combat, Hapatra and the Snake tokens go at Kuzno. He declares no blocks, and with Hapatra connecting, Seb puts the -1/-1 counter onto Shalai, and makes another Snake token. With nothing else, they pass. Max takes 1 from tapping his Adakar Wastes for blue to help cast Min. He then untaps a land with a Vizier to help cast Improbable Alliance. Max then cycles for free a Forgotten Cave, and he makes 3 tokens, a cat, an illusion, and a fairy. He then plays a Plains for turn, and passes. I scry 1 and keep it on top. I then play out a Woodland Cemetery for my land for turn, and mutate an Auspicious Starrix onto Thrun. Unfortunately, reading is hard, and I misplay the trigger, thinking I only reveal cards equal to how many times it's mutated, not until I hit that many permanents. I don't get anything, because I'm a goof. And at the end of turn, Kuzno then casts March of Multitudes, tapping some creatures, to put 2 into the X, and makes 2 tokens. Kuzno plays an Evolving Wilds, making another clue token, thanks to the Tireless Tracker. He then goes to combat, and swings Cadira at Seb. Seb blocks with Finn, and before damage is dealt, Kuzno activates Shalai to add a +1/+1 counter to his entire board. Cadira and Finn then trade, but Seb does take 1 from the trample damage at least. With Finn dying, Seb gets a Grave Pact trigger, and sadly, I seem to be the only non-token player at the table, so I suffer the most. Kuzno also resolves his Cadira trigger and gets to add an army of bunnies to his side of the board, and he then passes turn after that. Seb sacrifices a token on their upkeep to the Cultist trigger, and everyone who can sacrifice a creature does so to the Grave Pact trigger. Seb also drains the table for 1 with the Zulapur Cutthroat trigger. Seb then plays a Birds of Paradise and goes to combat. They go at Kuzno with Hapatra again, who doesn't block. Seb once more has the -1/-1 counter going onto Shalai and makes a Snake token, and then passes to Max. Max draws and cycles his Lonely Sandbar for free, making his token army again and drawing a card. He then goes to combat and swings his cat tokens at Seb, who just takes the hit. My turn is very quick, as I scry 1, draw it, and then pass after that. Kuzno's turn has Tireless Tracker's buddy, the Tireless Provisioner, coming in, and he then plays a City of Brass. He makes a clue token and a treasure token from the land entering. Kuzno then takes 1 as he taps the City of Brass and the rest of his lands, plus a treasure token, to help cast Seedborn Muse. Going to combat, he swings Shalai at Seb, and the soldiers with lifelink at me. Neither Seb nor I block, and we take our hits, with Kuzno gaining 4. Kuzno untaps with Seb, and Seb sacrifices the Birds of Paradise to the Cultist trigger on their upkeep. They then resolve the Grave Pact trigger, and drain everyone with the Zulapur Cutthroat trigger, and Seb then draws for turn. 3 mana gets Seb a Wood Elves, and in response to the Enter the Battlefield trigger, Max flashes in an Archivist of Ogma. This has Max drawing a card and gaining a life as Seb goes to find a forest card. Seb then goes at Kuzno again with Hapatra, and before moving to blocks, Kuzno sacrifices a clue token to draw, and puts a +1/+1 counter onto his Tireless Tracker. He then does it again to try and find an answer that won't cost him Shalai. He finds one in the form of Rootborn Defenses, making his board indestructible, and he populates a bunny token. He then blocks with the indestructible Shalai, and with nothing else, Seb passes. Max and Kuzno untap together, and Max activates his Improbable Alliance, drawing a card and discarding a card. This triggers all of his token makers as it's his second card for turn, and Max then thinks about going to combat, but decides just to pass. During his end step, Kuzno activates Shalai to put a +1/+1 counter onto his entire board. I scry and bottom it. I then draw for turn, and pay 3 mana for a Scoot Swarm. And I pay a green to draw a card from casting a creature spell. Once I'm done that, I play out a Morphic Pool. This gets me an insect token from the Scoot Swarm. As I've now joined part of the token team, I pass turn, and during my end step, Kuzno once more activates Shalai. Kuzno draws and plays Rabble Rousing, hiding away a card from his top 5. He picks his card quickly, which is a concern, and then moves to combat. He swings Shalai at Max, and all the rabbit tokens and soldiers at Seb. This gets Kuzno the Rabble Rousing on attack trigger, making him 8 tokens. He's then also able to cast the spell he hid, which is a Beastmaster's Ascension, and thankfully, it doesn't get the counters this time around, since he's already declared attackers. Max then blocks the Fairy token, and Seb blocks with their Snake tokens like so. Some of the buffed bunnies do get through though, but Seb has 3 Grave Pact triggers as well, and some Zulaport Cutthroat Drains. All that said and done, Max also has some triggers from his Illusions dying from Min, and he's able to put it on Azorius Signet, and then Prince Imral the Fair. And with nothing else, Kuzno passes. Seb sacrifices the Wood Elf to the Cultist trigger, and gets a Grave Pact trigger, and Zulaport Cutthroat drains everyone for 1. They then play a Swamp for turn, and go Kuzno once more with a Hapatra. In response, Kuzno sacrifices a Clue token, drawing a card, but then takes 5 from the commander. Seb then puts a -1/-1 counter onto Shalai and makes a Snake token. Max and Kuzno untap, and Max draws. In his main phase, Max casts an Ethereal Investigator and gets to investigate 3 times. Max then sacrifices a Clue token to draw a second card for turn, and just gets a zillion triggers to make tokens. He then passes after that. I scry 1 and bottom it, hoping to draw into a board wipe. I play out a Clearwater Pathway, and then just hard cast a Souvenir Snatcher and pay the green to draw a card. At this point, even if I did draw a board wipe, I don't have the mana for it, so I pass to Kuzno and what I'm assuming is our likely inevitable end. During my end step to really manifest this, Kuzno pumps his board by activating Shalai. Kuzno plays a Temple of Plenty, scrying 1 and making a Clue token and a Treasure token. He then plays out Sigarda, Host of Herons, and he then drops a Champion of Lambholt. He moves to combat and swings the bunnies at Seb, and the soldiers and provisioners at Max, and Shalai and the tracker at me. First he resolves the Rabble Rousing trigger, making 12 soldier tokens. These tokens entering add 12 +1/+1 counters to the champion, which means nothing under 13 power can block. He also adds 12 counters to the Ascension, which gives all of his creatures +5/+5. Seb and Max definitely die, while I drop to 1, and with a pretty decent turn behind him, Kuzno passes. Kuzno untaps with me, and I scry 1 and bottom it. I then draw for turn, but don't find a board wipe, and concede the game to Kuzno and his massive bunny army. Game review time. This game was 38 minutes and 35 seconds. My Otrimi deck did not perform well, and I think largely that was due to the fact that A, I misplayed the Auspicious Starrix, and B, Grave Pact is a brutal card to play against when you only have one creature out. That being said, I am very much looking forward to rebuilding Ramos and trying that out as Mutate deck again. Seb's Hapatra deck was pretty aggressive, although I'm pretty surprised that they blocked with Finn. It seemed like a pretty easy way for them to be able to take people out, but I guess having their creatures be on the ground with Death Touch, like the Snake tokens, really kind of limited how often they were going to get the poison counters in. Max's Gavi deck, despite the fact that he was making so many tokens, was actively hindered by the fact that Grave Pact was out. Sure, only 1 or 2 creatures on Seb's side were dying, but when Max was only making 3 tokens, it wasn't leaving him with a lot to do. What I was even more surprised with was considering how many cards he drew, he didn't find any kind of spot removal or board wipes. A board wipe would have been great against Cadira, and despite the fact that he missed a couple land drops early on, it seemed like Kuzno was really well ahead to run away with the game as of the mid-game. I think as soon as that Shalai and then the Seedborn Muse came out in the subsequent turns, things were pretty over, since basically it meant that almost every turn around his creatures were going to get 3 power and 3 toughness bigger, which is just not manageable. Couple that with Rabble Rousing and the Beastmaster Ascension, and you've got a recipe to win in combat. This video wouldn't be possible without the help from my sponsors, Cool Stuff Inc., Multizone, Original Magic Art, and Alter Sleeves. But it definitely wouldn't be possible without the help from you, the viewers, and my patrons. So I just want to say thank you for watching, and to remember, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.